Smart paging is one of those technologies that just seems confusing when you read about it in the documentation. So I want to point it out here. You will most likely hear about this in some form on the exam, and then we'll talk about configuring it, and it's kind of configured along with your dynamic memory. But first of all, what is smart paging? And before I answer that, let's go even more basic. What is paging? Everybody's familiar with this. When our machine runs out of physical RAM, it will reach out there to the paging file on the disk and use that disk as if it's RAM. Instead of writing things up into RAM, it will write it out to the disk. And we all know the problem with that. It works, it's just it slows everything down because it's a whole lot slower to write things to a disk than it is to write it into random access memory. So what is smart paging? It is a smarter version of this disk paging. It's the ability for a virtual machine to use disk space outside that virtual machine, out on the host system disk, as temporary memory when there's not enough physical RAM to restart a VM. Now, when we talked about dynamic memory, we talked about all the problems that was caused in Server 2008 because we had to make sure there was enough physical RAM on every virtual machine for a restart, even though once it was kind of riding along straight and steady, it didn't need nearly that much RAM. Smart paging will alleviate that inability to restart by going into a paging process when you don't have enough. Now, look at this note here. Smart paging is used during virtual machine restarts, and it is the only time when you're using that virtual machine when paging outside the virtual machine is utilized. All other times, once that virtual machine is running, it has started up or it has restarted. Once it's running, and if it needs more RAM than what's been allocated to it, or if it starts to run low on RAM and it can't get any more from the hypervisor, it will perform paging on the disk space within the virtual hard disk. So smart paging happens only when we have a restart that doesn't have enough memory, and it will page onto the host operating system's disk. Now, to configure smart paging, you really just tweak your settings in the dynamic memory section, because increasing the minimum memory section on the VM will reduce the amount of smart paging as long as enough physical RAM is available. So you'll just have to tweak with this, but if you notice your virtual machines being very, very slow to restart, they don't have enough memory to get restarted, and they're probably going into smart paging. Now, here's another thing to watch on the exam, these last two bullet points. The smart paging file, by default, is located on the system disk. It should be moved, should be located on a non-system disk for best performance. It'll work on the system disk. It's better for you if you can move it to a non-system disk. Watch for that situation on the exam, and then if you do get into smart paging, you can speed it up quite a bit by getting that smart paging file off to a non-system disk. So that's pretty much what you need to understand about smart paging. If this is a totally new topic to you, you might want to go out and read a little bit more out on TechNet. Not a whole lot more to it than this. It's a great idea. It works fantastic. Neat new function in Server 2012.